66 million years ago, a single massive rock changed the course of history forever. It crashed into our planet and wiped out the most dominant creatures to ever roam the land. If a rock of that magnitude hit us today, human civilization would stand on the brink of total extinction. Today, we are simulating a nightmare scenario where the 5 deadliest asteroids strike Earth simultaneously. Space rocks are not rare anomalies. They are constant visitors from the dark void. Most are tiny meteoroids weighing only a few grams, entering our world every single day. These micro-visitors slam into the atmosphere at speeds exceeding tens of kilometers per second. Fortunately, our planet's home security system, the atmosphere, usually burns them up instantly. But occasionally, a rock arrives that is too massive for the air to stop. When the atmosphere fails to act as a shield, the damage becomes catastrophic. We begin our journey 50,000 years in the past during the height of the last ice age. On a perfectly ordinary day, the Beringer asteroid tore through the sky at 15 kilometers per second. It slammed into the ground with the force of several nuclear bombs, flattening everything for miles. It left behind a massive scar on the face of the Earth that we can still see today. If this 300,000-ton bullet from space hit a modern city, the results would be nightmarish. Skyscrapers would be leveled instantly, their glass structures shattered for dozens of miles. Even if you survived the initial impact, the thermal heat would be enough to cause severe burns.
The ground would erupt in a 7.5 magnitude earthquake, toppling remaining structures.
This rock wouldn't end humanity, but it would certainly end the world for everyone in its path. To keep history accurate, we simulate its impact right where it hit 50 millennia ago. The resulting crater would be vast enough to swallow the entire Burj Khalifa inside its depths. From the nearby town of Winslow, residents would see a kilometer-high wall of ash rising. Moments later, the sonic boom would arrive, knocking people flat and shattering every window in town. But while Arizona burns, a much deadlier threat is already descending upon South America. In our modern world, understanding the facts of such an event is harder than ever. That is why tools like ground news are vital for cutting through the sensationalism of the media. They allow you to see how different outlets report on the same story across the political spectrum. Knowing who is reporting and why they are reporting it helps us find the objective truth. Because when a jumbo jet-sized rock is heading for your city, you need facts, not clickbait. Astronomers first spotted this intruder, known as YR4, in late 2024. At first, the data suggested a 3% chance of a direct hit on Earth in 2032. In the world of orbital mechanics, 3% is enough to trigger global alarm bells. But for our simulation, we skip the relief of a near miss and move straight to the impact. YR4 is roughly 60 meters long, making it as large as a jumbo jet. This intruder wouldn't even need to touch the ground to delete a city from the map. Like the Tunguska event, it would detonate in the air with the force of 15 megatons of TNT. That is 1,000 times more powerful than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Buildings would collapse, power lines would snap, and vehicles would be tossed into the air like toys. If you were outside, the initial flash would blind you before the blast wave even reached your position. The Andes Mountains would echo with the sound as millions of people were plunged into a new dark age. While the Andes settle into a terrifying silence, our focus shifts to a scar already etched into the face of the American desert. 50,000 years ago, a piece of the solar system's iron core decided to visit Earth. This was the Barringer asteroid, a 50-meter-wide mountain of solid nickel and iron. It screamed through the clouds at a staggering 12 kilometers per second. The air in its path didn't have time to move, compressing into a wall of superheated plasma. In an instant, the peaceful Pleistocene landscape of Arizona was vaporized by a flash brighter than 10 suns. The impact released the energy of 10 megatons of TNT, equivalent to the largest nuclear bombs ever tested. Today, the hole it left behind is nearly a mile wide and deep enough to hide a 60-story skyscraper. But what if this iron giant didn't hit a barren desert, but a modern heart of steel and glass? We move our simulation to the center of a dense urban canyon where millions reside. Sensors detect the incoming projectile only seconds before it arrives, far too late for an evacuation. People look up as the blue sky is torn open by a sonic boom that shatters every window for miles. The Barringer asteroid strikes the roof of a 100-story tower at 40,000 miles per hour. The kinetic energy is so great that the iron rock doesn't just crush the building, it explodes like a tactical warhead. A shockwave of compressed air ripples outward, flattening smaller structures as if they were made of paper. The heat from the impact ignites everything flammable within a 3-mile radius. Engineers explain that the bedrock beneath the city would liquefy, swallowing the foundations of neighboring towers. Where a thriving financial district once stood, only a smoking, glass-lined crater remains. This 50-meter rock is just a cosmic pebble compared to what is lurking further out in the dark. Behind the iron ghost of Barringer, a much stranger and more deceptive threat was already on its way. Space agencies had been tracking an object designated as YR4, a carbon-rich asteroid with a very different personality. Unlike the solid iron Barringer, YR4 is a rubble pile, a loose collection of boulders held together by gravity. When a rubble pile hits the atmosphere, it doesn't stay in one piece. It acts like a cosmic shotgun blast. In our next simulation, this fragile killer is heading straight for the high-altitude capital of Bogota. The city's elevation means the asteroid has less air to slow it down, making the strike even more lethal. As it enters the airspace, the asteroid begins to compress the thin mountain air into a detonator. Suddenly, the entire object shatters in mid-air, creating a massive airburst explosion. The downward force of the blast wave hits the city like the hammer of a god. Buildings don't just fall, they are pulverized into fine powder by the pressure differential. Tens of thousands of homes vanish in a heartbeat under the weight of the sky itself. This airburst phenomenon is what happened over Tunguska in 1908, flattening 80 million trees in an instant. But YR4 is only the second horseman of this cosmic apocalypse. While the world reels from these strikes, telescopes catch sight of something that shouldn't exist. It is a long, cigar-shaped object moving with a strange, non-ballistic trajectory. This is Oumuamua, the first interstellar visitor ever recorded in human history. It doesn't come from our sun. It comes from the vast, empty reaches between the stars. And unlike the iron of Barringer or the rubble of YR4, Oumuamua is moving far too fast for any defense system to track. It is heading for the green heart of the planet, the Amazon rainforest. Scientists realize that this interstellar traveler carries a kinetic punch that could ignite the very atmosphere. As the shadow of Oumuamua falls over the jungle, a much larger, more ancient nightmare begins to stir in the North Atlantic. In the quiet observatories of Chile, the Atlas system flagged a flickering light in December 2024. Astronomers realized this was not a distant star, but asteroid YR4 heading directly for our doorstep. Initial data suggested a terrifying 3% chance of a direct collision with Earth. While scientists scrambled to refine the orbit, the threat level hovered in a zone of pure panic. Eventually, the calculated odds dropped, but in our simulation, the worst-case scenario is reality. Imagine the year is 2032 and the countdown to impact has finally reached 0. ER4 is a jagged 60-meter rock roughly the size of a modern jumbo jet. It strikes the atmosphere at hypersonic speeds, instantly turning the air around it into white-hot plasma. High above the Andes Mountains, the sky begins to burn with an unnatural light. In Bogota, Colombia, 7 million people look up to see a second sun appearing overhead. This asteroid doesn't need to hit the ground to be a harbinger of total destruction. 10 kilometers above the city, the internal pressure of the rock becomes too great to bear. YR4 detonates in a massive airburst, releasing the energy of 15 megatons of TNT. This is 1,000 times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. The shock wave rips downward, striking the city with the force of a solid hammer. Glass windows shatter instantly across every skyscraper in the metropolitan area. Power lines snap like guitar strings, plunging the entire Andean region into darkness. Vehicles are tossed through the air like discarded toys by the sheer pressure of the blast. Anyone caught outside is instantly blinded by the flash before being knocked to the ground. Seconds later, the thermal radiation ignites everything flammable within the city limits. Neighborhoods turn into infernos as the atmosphere itself seems to catch fire. Debris and glass turn into a deadly storm of shrapnel traveling at hundreds of kilometers per hour. The mountains echo with the thunder of the explosion, a sound heard for hundreds of miles. Communication networks fail as the electromagnetic pulse from the airburst fries local electronics. Panic quickly gives way to a stunned, silent chaos across the high-altitude plateau. Because the asteroid exploded in the air, there is no crater, only a scorched zone of total flattening. This event would be remembered as the Day of the Scorched Earth for all of South America. While this wouldn't end humanity, it would change the geopolitical landscape forever. Humanity does have a plan for such threats, known as the DART Planetary Defense System. By slamming a probe into a rock years in advance, we can nudge it into a safe trajectory. But planetary defense requires early detection, and sometimes space is better at hiding its secrets. As the fires in Bogota continue to burn, the global threat only intensifies. The airburst was just the opening act for a much larger cosmic performance. Deep in the Amazon rainforest, another shadow is lengthening, unlike any we've ever seen. This new intruder is not a local rock, but a traveler from the deep interstellar void. It is known as Oumuamua, the first interstellar visitor to reach our inner solar system. While Bogota struggles to breathe, the Amazon is about to face an impact of a different kind. This interstellar guest is accelerating, drawn in by Earth's gravity with relentless speed. The world's green lung is about to be punctured by a gigaton-scale explosion. As the shadow of Oumuamua falls over the jungle, a much larger, more ancient nightmare begins to stir in the North Atlantic. High above the verdant canopy of the Amazon, the sky begins to warp with an unnatural shimmering heat. A dark, elongated shape pierces the upper atmosphere, trailing a wake of ionized plasma that glows like a dying star. This is Oumuamua, the first interstellar traveler ever recorded, an alien rock that originated far beyond our solar system. Unlike the typical round boulders of our neighborhood, this visitor is 10 times longer than it is wide, resembling a jagged cosmic needle. It moves with a strange, erratic acceleration that once led scientists to wonder if it was more than just a simple rock. Now, that mystery is irrelevant as the object accelerates to 26 kilometers per second, aimed directly at the heart of South America. For a terrifying moment, a second sun appears to ignite over the rainforest, casting long, distorted shadows across the forest floor. The air itself screams as the sonic boom shatters the eardrums of every living creature within a 100-mile radius. Oumuamua strikes the humid earth with the force of 1 gigaton of energy, instantly vaporizing millions of tons of soil and water. A massive crater 4 kilometers wide is torn into the basin, glowing like a fresh wound on the planet's surface. The shockwave races outward, snapping ancient mahogany trees like brittle matchsticks for dozens of kilometers. What was once the world's green lung is instantly transformed into a hellish ring of scorched earth and black charcoal. Far beyond the horizon, local towns feel the ground heave as if a giant has stomped on the earth. Black snow begins to fall, not of ice, but of fine charcoal and incinerated biological matter. The Amazon River itself begins to run hot, its waters clouded with thick gray ash that chokes all aquatic life. Throughout the northern reaches of the continent, the sun is blotted out, causing crops to wither under the perpetual twilight. While Oumuamua's strike is a regional catastrophe, it is merely a precursor to the global nightmare that is following close behind. The smoke from the Amazon starts to drift north, merging with the dust clouds from Arizona and Bogotá. Across the Gulf of Mexico, a deceptive calm settles over the beaches of the Yucatan Peninsula. But the ocean is beginning to retreat, the water pulling back from the shore as if the sea itself is holding its breath. High in the sky, a star that shouldn't be there begins to outshine the morning sun. This is no mere interstellar visitor or jumbo jet-sized rock. This is a mountain-sized executioner. The Chicxulub asteroid, the killer of kings and dinosaurs alike, has returned to claim its original impact site. The atmosphere around the descending rock ignites, turning the sky into a furnace of white-hot plasma. Below, the jungle animals that survived the previous shocks fall silent as the heat from the sky becomes unbearable. This impact won't just level a city or burn a forest, it will rewrite the laws of biology on Earth. As the behemoth crosses the threshold of the lower atmosphere, the vacuum in its wake pulls the very clouds into its path. The energy of the impending strike is calculated in millions of megatons, a number that renders human weaponry insignificant. In a few seconds, the coastal paradise of Mexico will be transformed into the epicenter of a global grave. The pressure wave ahead of the asteroid hits the ocean surface, creating a literal hole in the sea before the rock even touches the water. Birds fall from the sky, their wings unable to cope with the sudden, massive increase in air pressure. The final countdown for human civilization has begun, signaled by a flash that can be seen from the moon. The sound of the impact is not a bang, but a tectonic roar that travels through the very core of the planet. Skyscrapers in nearby cities don't just fall, they are ground into dust by the sheer intensity of the seismic waves. The first of the 100-meter tsunamis begins its journey, a wall of black water that will soon devour every coastline. Oxygen in the immediate vicinity is consumed by the fireball, leaving only a vacuum of heat and death. The Oumuamua strike was the spark, but Chicxulub is the wildfire that will consume the world's future. Yet even as the world burns, an even larger shadow is beginning to emerge from the deepest part of the ocean. The ancient Titan S2 is no longer a legend of the past. Its arrival is synchronized with the planetary collapse. As the first tsunami reaches the ruined Amazon, the sky turns a bruised purple, and the true weight of the final asteroid begins to pull the very air from our lungs. The bruised purple sky of the Amazon begins to bleed into a blinding, unnatural white light. High above the Gulf of Mexico, a new star has appeared with terrifying speed. This is no ordinary meteor, but a mountain of rock 10 kilometers wide, known as Chicxulub. It moves at 20 kilometers per second, faster than any human-made craft could ever dream. On the ground in Cancun, the tourists stop their play as the secondary sun grows larger. They do not know that this is the same killer that ended the reign of the dinosaurs 66 million years ago. The air in front of the rock is compressed so violently that it turns into a wall of white-hot plasma. In less than a minute, the celestial mountain has crossed the distance from space to the ocean floor. The impact does not just splash the water, it vaporizes the sea instantly. A crater 30 kilometers deep is punched into the Earth's crust in a fraction of a second. The kinetic energy released is equivalent to billions of Hiroshima-sized nuclear bombs. A thermal pulse sweeps outward at the speed of light, igniting everything within thousands of miles. In Cancun, the skyscrapers do not just fall, they are scoured into dust by the shockwave. The ground itself begins to ripple like the surface of a pond under the force of a magnitude 10 earthquake. Within minutes, the immediate area around the Yucatan has been transformed into a molten wasteland. But the death of Mexico is only the beginning of this global catastrophe. Millions of tons of vaporized rock are ejected into space, only to fall back as burning glass. The atmosphere begins to heat up like a giant oven, reaching temperatures that can bake life alive. In the distance, the ocean floor has been displaced so violently that the water must seek its revenge. A wall of water over 100 meters high is forming, destined for every coastline in the Gulf. This tsunami will not just flood cities, it will erase them from the map entirely. Sulfur from the limestone at the impact site is blasted into the stratosphere, turning into acid rain. The sun, once a source of life, is now being choked out by a shroud of black soot. Global communications fail as the ionosphere is electrified by the falling debris. Humanity's dominance over the planet is extinguished in the span of a single afternoon. The forests of North America ignite as the global temperature spike causes spontaneous combustion. This is the fireball that ends the era of man, leaving no corner of the Earth untouched. Under the weight of the debris, the very atmosphere begins to groan with tectonic pressure. Every living creature that breathes air now struggles against a thick, toxic slurry of ash. The shockwaves travel through the core of the planet, triggering volcanoes on the opposite side of the world. No bunker is deep enough and no wall is strong enough to withstand this planetary reset. As the initial fires die down, a new and more terrifying phase of the disaster begins. The impact has released so much dust that the day will not return for several years. The food chain, built on the energy of the sun, starts to crumble at its very foundation. Water cycles are disrupted, and the rains that do fall are more corrosive than battery acid. This is the price of a mountain falling from the stars onto a modern civilization. History has repeated itself, but this time there are no survivors to tell the story. The survivors of the first hour now face a world that is fundamentally hostile to their existence. The global temperature begins its rapid, terrifying descent into a long volcanic winter. As the last of the heat dissipates, the ocean itself begins to retreat further, revealing a massive, glowing rift that was never there before. The retreat of the ocean reveals a jagged, glowing scar across the seabed that pulses with the planet's inner fire. Silence falls over the coastline as the water continues to pull back toward the horizon. Far out at sea, a low, dark line begins to swell against the smoky sky. The wall of water grows taller with every passing second, reaching heights that defy human comprehension. Coastal cities stand defenseless as the 100-meter-high crest finally breaks over the continental shelf. Steel and glass shatter like brittle ice when the first wave slams into the skyscrapers. Entire city blocks are erased from the map in a matter of heartbeats. The surge carries the debris of civilization deep into the heart of the continents. High above the destruction, the atmosphere begins to choke on the ejecta of the impact. The sun is reduced to a pale, ghostly disk as the volcanic winter takes its first breath. Temperatures across the globe begin a rapid and lethal descent into the negatives. This phenomenon is the result of billions of tons of sulfur aerosols reflecting the sun's warmth back into space. Photosynthesis grinds to a halt as the world is plunged into a perpetual twilight. The food chains of the planet begin to collapse like a house of cards. Acid rain begins to fall, corroding the remnants of the structures that survived the waves. In the darkness, the survivors scramble for any source of heat and shelter. The sound of the wind becomes a constant mourning howl across the empty plains. Earth's geological processes are now the only things dictating the future of the species. Models suggest that this volcanic winter could last for more than a decade. Every day is a struggle against the encroaching ice and the lack of oxygen. But the Chicxulub asteroid was only the second horseman of this global apocalypse. While the dust settles, a new gravity well begins to tug at the planet's orbit. The oceans, though mostly frozen, begin to churn with a new, unnatural tide. Seismographs that are still functional detect a pulse deep within the Earth's core. The impact didn't just break the surface, it sent shockwaves through the very foundation of the world. Mountains that have stood for eons begin to crumble under the pressure of the shifting plates. The volcanic winter is not a temporary phase, it is the new normal for a broken planet. Life on the surface has become a memory, preserved only in the deep frost. But the planet's agony is far from over. Sensors detect a massive gravitational anomaly near the orbit of the Moon. The ancient Titan, the S2 asteroid, is finally making its presence known. It does not approach with speed, but with the inevitable weight of a cosmic executioner. The atmosphere, already thin and polluted, begins to boil at the mere proximity of the giant. Below, the ice sheets that had just formed begin to crack and melt instantly. The remaining survivors look up to see a second moon, much larger and darker, filling the sky. The time for scientific observation has passed. Now, there's only the wait. The S2 asteroid is a relic of the Paleoarchean era, a time when Earth was a primordial furnace. It has come back to return the planet to that original molten state. The gravitational pull is so strong that the Earth's crust begins to buckle and lift toward the sky. As the S2 touches the very edge of the atmosphere, a blinding flash erupts from a point on the horizon where a different asteroid has just landed first. We must travel back 3.3 billion years to an era when Earth was a primordial water world. During the Paleoarchean era, the atmosphere lacked oxygen and a protective ozone layer. Simple, single-celled organisms like cyanobacteria were the only masters of this alien landscape. But a shadow began to grow over the iron-rich horizons as the Titan S2 approached. This space rock was a monstrosity, measuring 200 times the mass of the Chicxulub asteroid. As it pierced the atmosphere, the sky didn't just light up, it ignited into a global furnace. The S2 plunged into the shallow seas near what we now recognize as South Africa. The impact was so powerful that it instantly tore the very seafloor apart. A fireball the size of an entire continent rose high into the stratosphere. The surrounding ocean waters didn't just splash, they began to boil away into steam. Massive tsunamis, hundreds of meters tall, began to race across the global ocean. These waves ripped debris from the ocean floor and tossed it miles into the air. Molten rock rained back down from the heavens like a barrage of liquid fire. The upper layers of the ocean heated up to temperatures that would be lethal to almost any life. Yet this cataclysmic shakeup was exactly what the stagnant planet needed to thrive. The impact stirred up vast quantities of iron from the deepest parts of the ocean. This sudden influx of nutrients turned the lifeless seas into a biological goldmine. Microorganisms experienced a massive population boom in the wake of the destruction. However, we must realize that what was good for bacteria would be a death sentence for us. If the S2 hit near modern South Africa today, the impact crater would stretch for hundreds of kilometers. Earthquakes 100 times stronger than any in human history would shatter the tectonic plates. Every single coastal ecosystem on the planet would be obliterated in a single afternoon. The sheer volume of vaporized rock would block out the sun for decades, not just years. Humanity would find no refuge from the falling fire and the ensuing permanent winter. This impact would represent a total planetary reset, erasing the era of complex life entirely. We have looked at these disasters as individual events, but the true horror is yet to come. Each one of these rocks carries enough energy to change the course of history on its own. But imagine if the barriers of time collapsed and all five struck the Earth simultaneously. The atmosphere would be torn apart by the combined pressure of 5 sonic booms. There would be no place to hide, as the entire surface of the planet becomes a kill zone. Even the deepest bunkers would crumble under the force of magnitude 12 earthquakes. The oceans would churn with the force of 5 distinct tsunamis clashing in the middle of the Atlantic. This isn't just an extinction event, it is the physical dismantling of the Earth's biosphere. We are currently living in a golden age of stability that we often take for granted. Our history is written in the craters of those who came before us, reminding us of our fragility. But as we look up at the stars tonight, we must wonder which rock is currently on its way. The 5 asteroids are now perfectly aligned, their trajectories locked onto our fragile home. The final countdown has begun for a disaster that will leave the planet unrecognizable. As the first of the 5 makes contact, the ground beneath your feet ceases to be solid. Suddenly, the sky turns a shade of purple never seen by human eyes, and a second, much larger object appears behind the first 4. The purple sky ripples as the colossal shadow of S2 eclipses the dying sun. Below the descending Titan, the first 4 impacts have already turned the continents into a sea of fire. Atmospheric pressure spikes violently as S2 compresses the air into a wall of solid heat. In Arizona, the Beringer crater is swallowed by a tectonic rift opening across the desert floor. The shockwave from the Amazon impact meet the fires of Bogota, creating a firestorm that covers South America. S2 makes contact with the Indian Ocean, and the kinetic energy vaporizes millions of tons of water instantly. A literal wall of rock and steam 10 kilometers high rises toward the edge of space. The Earth's crust begins to ring like a bell, sending magnitude 12 earthquakes through every city. Communication satellites are knocked out by the rising debris cloud, plunging the world into a final silence. The atmosphere is now a thick soup of sulfur, ash, and pulverized granite. Tsunami waves from the S2 impact reach heights that dwarf the tallest mountains on the coast. Every forest on the planet ignites simultaneously as the air itself becomes a furnace. The sheer mass of the 5 asteroids alters the very rotation of the planet by several milliseconds. Deep in bunkers, the last remnants of humanity feel the heat through miles of solid rock. The oceans begin to boil at the surface, releasing ancient gases trapped for eons. Molten rock rains down on the Antarctic ice caps, turning the frozen continent into a steaming graveyard. The sky turns a permanent, bruised shade of black as the sun is completely erased from view. Within hours, the average global temperature rises by hundreds of degrees. Cities that once stood for millennia are reduced to unrecognizable mounds of fused glass. The era of mammals ends not with a whimper, but with the roar of 1,000 volcanoes. This is a total reset of the biological clock, wiping away 3 billion years of evolution. As the dust settles over the coming centuries, the Earth will look more like Venus than the home we knew. Deep in the steaming, iron-rich seas, the only survivors are the extremophiles that thrive in the heat. The moon looks down on a planet that no longer reflects the lights of civilization. Rain begins to fall again after decades, but it is a corrosive acid that dissolves the ruins. The silence is absolute, save for the constant howling of global hurricanes. The 5 asteroids have completed their mission, returning the world to its primal state. No one is left to record the history of what once was a vibrant blue marble. But life is stubborn, and in the chaos, the foundations for a new world are being laid. The iron stirred up by S2 will eventually provide the nutrients for a second dawn of biology. Perhaps in another billion years, a new intelligent species will wonder why the Earth's crust is so scarred. The planet continues its orbit, indifferent to the rise and fall of those who lived upon it. The cosmic hammer has fallen, and the resonance will last for eternity. We are but a chapter in a very long book, written in the language of stars and impacts. The simulation concludes, leaving us with the terrifying beauty of our own fragility. In the vastness of space, Earth is a target, but it is also a survivor. The reset is complete, and the Earth sleeps, waiting for the next spark of life. A new moon rises over the horizon of a world that is once again young. The chaos has passed, and order slowly begins to return to the solar system. This was the end of our world, but it is just the beginning of the next.